It started like any other night. Clara had come home from her shift at the hospital, exhausted, her mind racing but her body heavy. She lay on her narrow bed in her small apartment, the city noise muffled by the cracked window panes. She thought she would drift into a dreamless sleep, but that night, sleep didn't come the way it usually did. Instead, she woke in the middle of the night, or at least, she thought she woke. Her eyes were wide open, staring at the ceiling, her breathing shallow. She tried to move her arm, but it felt as if iron chains held her down. Her chest tightened, her lips trembled, her voice refused to come out. Paralysis. A strange buzzing sound filled her ears, like a swarm of angry bees or whispers in a language she couldn't understand. And then the shadows in her room began to move. At first, she thought it was a streetlight outside bending across her curtains. But no, this shadow was thicker, darker, pulsing with a life of its own. And then it took form. A tall, faceless figure emerged from the corner. Its body was made of smoke, and its hands stretched longer than human arms should. The figure leaned over her, and though it had no eyes, she felt its gaze drilling into her soul. She wanted to scream, but her throat locked tight. She could only watch as the figure inched closer, pressing its weight down on her chest. Then came the breath, hot, rotten, right against her ear, and with it a whisper, "You belong to us now." The next morning, Clara woke up drenched in sweat, her heart pounding. She tried to convince herself it was just a dream, a trick of exhaustion. But deep down, she knew better, because that night it happened again. This time, she felt the weight before she even opened her eyes. Her body was frozen, her lungs barely drawing in air. And then she saw them, not just one shadow figure, but three. They stood around her bed in silence, their heads twitching unnaturally, like broken dolls. One bent so close its faceless head nearly brushed hers. She could hear its breathing inside her skull. Suddenly, she was no longer in her room. The walls melted away. The ceiling disappeared. She was lying on a bed floating in an endless black void. Above her, thousands of faceless figures hovered, whispering in unison, "Join us! Join us! Join us!" The sound vibrated through her bones until she thought she would shatter. And then one of them climbed onto her chest. Its hands pressed down so hard she thought her ribs would break. Clara's vision blurred. She saw flashes, a version of herself, standing in the corner of the room, watching. That other Clara smiled, but her eyes were black holes. And then she snapped awake, but the bruises remained on her chest. She cried out, running to her mirror, pulling her nightshirt aside. Blue and purple marks stretched across her ribs, exactly where the creature had pressed. This was no dream. By the third night, Clara was too afraid to sleep. She left the lights on, clutched her Bible, and prayed until her lips cracked. But when sleep finally dragged her under, the paralysis returned, heavier than ever. This time, she couldn't even open her eyes at first. She heard footsteps pacing around her bed. Slow, heavy, dragging. Something circled her like a predator stalking its prey. And then she felt fingers, cold and bony, brushing her ankle. The touch crept up her leg, over her thigh, until it pressed against her chest. Her body convulsed, but she couldn't move. When her eyes finally opened, the figure was no longer faceless. It had her face, a twisted, demonic reflection of herself, smiling with jagged teeth. Its eyes burned red, and when it spoke, its voice was hers but layered with 1,000 echoes. "You can't fight us. You are already ours." Her body began to lift from the bed, levitating. She screamed inside her head, but no sound escaped. The ceiling cracked open above her, revealing a chasm of fire and writhing shadows reaching upward. They wanted to drag her down. With the last ounce of strength, she remembered her mother's voice. "Call on the name of Jesus when you are afraid." Her lips barely parted, but she forced out a single word. "Jesus." Instantly, the shadows shrieked, recoiling like fire-consuming dry leaves. The figure's face twisted in rage, then dissolved into smoke. Clara fell back onto her bed, sobbing, finally able to breathe. But the battle wasn't over, because even now, as she lay awake, she could still hear the whisper at the edge of her mind. "We'll be back."